morning, Mary Esther. Today is March the 16th, 2015, and we're here to interview Mary Esther McIwee Field, and it's sponsored by Boomers and Beyond, which is a non-profit organization and financed through grants and donations. Filming and production is done by Bob Werko and Rita Bond of Third Eye Productions. So let's begin with finding out if you're willing to tell us when you were born and where.
August 19th, 1932, and I believe it was the Rockwell House for a long time. It was an early time, well, it wasn't a regular hospital, but whether it was just a birthing center or what, but that's, and here in Gunnison.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about your grandparents? How did your family get to the Gunnison Valley?
Let's see, my mother was from Buena Vista. Her family came from, her dad's family came over on a ship from England, and he was, actually her father was born on the way to the United States. And I think they lived in the Midwest for a little while, moved to Buena Vista, bought a ranch. My grandmother was already living in the area. In fact, she was, her name was Lily Winfield Odd. And Winfield came from Winfield, Colorado. It's up above Granite, over by Buena Vista and Salida, because she was the first white child born in Winfield, and it was an old mining town. And so that they came from there. My mother came to college here. Later, my grandmother came and lived here after her husband had died years before that. And then my dad came from around Canyon City, but his family had come from Scotland. His dad had actually come from Scotland with a lot of brothers, and his mom, my grandmother McIwee, her name is Hennessy, Mary Hennessy, and she came from the Midwest, but I don't know exactly where they met, but she was from Ireland. And there was a whole McIwee family that I found out later that spent a number of brothers, and then like the older men had several kids, and a number of them spent a lot of time at Crested Butte in the early 1900s. And so he was more of a mining background, and my mother's family was probably more from the ranching area.
Okay. Could you share a memory of your grandparents?
Not very much. My grandfather, my mom's dad died right after World War I in the flu epidemic, so I never did know him. I knew my grandmother used to stay with her, go to Buena Vista, visit with her, and remembering going there to visit, and at night you could hear the train whistle because the train tracks went right through Buena and right by her house. And my other grandfather died when I was pretty little. They lived in Penrose, and my grandmother eventually moved to Arizona. And as long as I remember her, even in one early picture that I've got, she had white hair she wore a knot in the back, and just a typical, really sweet Irish, strong, but very soft-spoken grandmother. And so I really didn't know my grandfathers, that I can remember. Or the one, of course, not. The other one I don't really remember very well.
So they were mostly ranchers?
Well, my mother's folks were ranchers. My dad's folks were were miners, per se. And then they did different things, throughout their lives. Eventually, my grandfather, I think, worked on the highway down by Canyon City, but he was a miner. Most of his family were miners for a good length of their early years. And there's quite a bit about the whole McIwee clan. There were a lot of them that were at Crested Butte, which I hadn't known. My grandmother talked about that just once. She said, I remember being in Crested Butte, and I think she was a very young married woman. She said, I remember how much fun we had.
Okay, well, how about your mother? She came here to go to college?
She came here to go to Western, graduated. My mother and dad were married about the middle of my mother's senior year. My mother was very active in the college, and my dad also, and then he ran the dorm. Well, I don't know how. He went, I think, 2 years, and then he was running the cafeteria, and pretty soon he was running the cafeteria in the boys' dorm. And they were running that, or he was managing that. My mother was finishing school, and then a couple of years later, it was when I was born. And that was, they were at the college at the time. And I lived at the college till I was about freshman in high school.
So the college campus was your playground?
Yeah, it was. And, it was really a small college, and I can just tell, lots of teachers. I remember President Casey, and his wife was Pearl, Cora Bruns, Borland, Jorgensen, and a lot of families lived in the faculty apartments. And we ate all our meals in the cafeteria. So I had lots of friends who loved to come there to eat. As well, I liked to go to their house because they sat down around a table with their family. But the cafeteria was a big attraction. And then the grill was there. So, and I loved the college kids. They were very good to my brother and I. My brother had a very interesting vocabulary, which they didn't do with me. But other than that, we had a great time. They were really, really good to kids. And there were other children and all the teachers and stuff. You knew the teachers. They knew you. That's where kind of the fireworks started with, I believe, Wilson. Wilson, and who else?
Wilson.
What?
T.K. Wilson.
Yeah, T.K. Wilson, right. And so there are lots of good memories. I have lots of good memories of the college.
So then later, your mother ran the
Right.
Rhodes restaurant.
Yeah, she basically, they left the college and bought, well, I didn't buy, but they leased the restaurant. It was it was the Allen Hotel at the time, and they leased that restaurant. And then my dad, the man that they had hired to take his place at the cafeteria, I guess it didn't work out. So my dad went back there for a year, and then they kind of ran the restaurant. And then my dad went to Arizona shortly after that to help my aunt and uncle with the resort in Oak Creek Canyon where my grandmother lived. And my folks divorced, and my mother taught school for several years at the high school. She after she ran the restaurant, or after they had run the restaurant, and then eventually she married Carl Goad, and they had worked at they had the Cattleman's again restaurant, and then they built Goad's Fine Foods. And my mother, she taught at the high school about the same time I was there, which wasn't exactly what I wanted her to do, but I avoided having to take any of her classes because I'm sure she didn't want me to. So. But anyway, yeah, it was a good growing up. My grandmother lived with us, my grandmother Tompkins.
I remember that your mother employed a lot of college students and high school students as waitresses,
Right.
and she taught them the proper way to serve food.
Right. And they wore hairnets.
And they were not to touch the glasses where people
Right.
drank.
Right. I don't think, it was a whole different world.
Yeah. Okay, so you have one brother?
I have one brother. He lives in Colorado Springs. He's retired. And he was with Youth Services Colorado for most of his working career. Lived in Denver and then in Colorado Springs.
Okay. Well, what was Gunnison like when you were growing up?
We walked to school. I mean, the buses came in from the ranches, but at that time the buses weren't owned by the school. I think people had a bus and they contracted to the school, because I know Mr. Hogan ran the bus that Fred rode on, because he came from that part of the county. And that was the day and age when they were told if they didn't behave, he'd just put them out on the side of the road. And they believed him. And I don't know that he ever did that, but he might have. I don't remember. But anyway, in town, it was, especially at the college, we were right across from the skating pond. The man that kind of ran the skating pond, there was a warming house, was Mr. Chinry. And you spent most of the weekend skating and also going to the movies. Because we had the theater that George Bessie and Ben Snyder ran, the Unique Theater on Main Street. And you could go to the movie. There would be about 3 changes during the week. And so as a little kid, you could go both Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon. And then after you got in high school, that was the big dating thing. I mean, you could go to the movies on Saturday night or Sunday night. There were dances at the high school. There was what they called social hour and they had that at Webster Hall, and they had a little band every time. And so kids did that from, I think, 7 to 9, and it was well attended. Boys stood on one side, the girls on the other. But there was, it seemed like it was great. And a lot of my friends, I grew up with, went to school with, some of them are back here. There'd be people that people know, like Ron Coffey, Glenn George, Nancy Pressler, Hugh Pressler, Sally Trine, Donna Bratton was a few years younger than I was. Her sister Patsy was my age, and you had lifelong friends, and you had new people coming and going. And I had one lady tell me, or one girl tell me, she said, "You were the first person that smiled at me," and that stuck in my head. So I try to smile a lot because it's nice. That's why I go to McDonald's, because they smile a lot. I mean, it's fun, and they laugh, but it was a great place to grow up. And the skating was really a part of my growing up, and I don't think I was particularly good. I used to ski with my dad when it was at Pioneer, up at Pioneer. One of the first ski courses they opened had a chair tow that drug you in the snow all the way, and then he would take people to Monarch, or go to Monarch. It would be a group. I remember one time Dr. Light and Betty went with us, and there was a trail off the road. And so when I was a kid, and then after I got in high school and he moved, then I just kind of quit skiing again until I was married. I remember about the very different boots, very different long, narrow skis when I was first started. And then I remember as an adult skiing, I skied for several years. I wasn't too good, but my feet always hurt.
So, how important was the sweet shop? Was the sweet shop?
All right, and that I remember that more in high school. It was important. And I was trying to think who Calkins ran it, I think. And they did things for, if somebody made a touchdown, they would give them a soda or something. And the sweet shop was kind of a gathering place. Another place that my friends and I really gathered was at Johnson's Cafe, which was Harry and Sarah Trine. That was Sally's and Shirley's folks. And they were great with kids. I waited tables there one summer before they changed it and wore the old-fashioned outfits and stuff. It was just a regular little restaurant, and I swore that Sarah fed half the people in town. That really were. It was not a very wealthy place particularly. Well, nobody was, and there just wasn't a lot to have. But I don't ever remember. I always remember just pretty much everybody was pretty much the same in my mind. As a kid growing up, you had friends, and a lot of adults knew you. And you knew them, and there's some of it is like that now. It's just the world moves faster.
You had a picture of your dad.
Yes, I do. I have a picture of my dad, and also a picture of my mom up at the college. So here is one of my dad skiing, and there's also a picture I know in here of that I think I lost of where a Pioneer was, because it's a thing of the past. Let's see if I still got it. Nope. But here is a picture of my dad, and here is the picture of my mother at the college when she was teaching a little.
Just hold the picture.
Just hold it up.
Well, of your dad, yeah.
Oh, okay, my dad. Okay, this other one might be hard to see, but there we go.
Okay.
What? Lay it down. Okay. And I don't know if you can see this other one or not.
I'll take pictures later.
Okay.
So, what? Did you have chores? What was your home life like?
Well, no, I didn't. I don't know that I did have chores. Good. I mean, I think you had. You did your studies. I think I helped with dishes, things like that. But I spent when I was at the college there. I was about till I was in junior high or 8th grade. The chores were pretty scarce because we had a small apartment. And I'm sure we had, mostly we had to behave ourselves. I do know that. And I was probably pretty well behaved. And we were raised as Catholics. And I had a friend who described herself as a good Catholic girl. And I think probably that's pretty a description of me growing up too. And a lot of my friends, we went to, I had several friends that were Catholic. And so we did, that was important at that time. My folks were Catholic at that time. And it was great. It was great, and it was a small town. I think I had a very good growing up. I think the kind of growing up that lots of kids did in small towns all over the country.
So what were some of your traditions for holidays? What were the customs in your family?
Pretty much, we went to midnight mass. I remember, and then had presents in the morning. And people didn't travel, even going to Crested Butte when I was growing up was a big deal. And we played Crested Butte in basketball and things, and so, but going up there, it wasn't like you went very much. So your travels were pretty limited. I didn't have a lot of family that came, they lived too far away. So it was mostly my mother, my dad, probably my grandmother sometimes, and my brother and I. And we always had a Christmas tree, and, I guess when we were at the college, it's hard to remember because that was a little different. We still had the Christmas tree, but we were far from family. We used to go to Arizona in the summer, but pretty much it was just our family probably because
it's a little different nowadays when kids get piles of presents.
Yeah, we got presents, but it was. I'm kind of. We got presents. I think about the same amount anybody did, not a lot, but some. I never felt, and I don't think my brother did either, that we did without. But there just wasn't as much. There just certainly wasn't as much out there.
So talk about the fashions when you were in school. Are they a lot different than they
when I was in high school? You wore saddle shoes. And jeans. I remember that in high school, a lot of the boys, and I remember that's when I started dating Fred. They wore Levi's and white shirts, which would have been horrible because of the ironing at that time. But in the girls,
you had to wear dresses, right?
Yeah, well, yes, I think we did. I think we could wear. I can't remember. We used to have called saddle pants that were made out of like jeans on like another fabric, and I think you could wear those maybe on Fridays when there was games and things like that. But I think pretty much everybody wore dresses to school, and I can remember some of my outfits, a couple of them. But I flat can't. They didn't. There wasn't a style that really rang out.
Socks.
The skirts were probably a little longer, and I remember
socks.
the saddle shoes.
Bobby socks.
And Bobby socks, and you put these metal curlers in your hair, and and I was in band and a lot of different activities, and a twirler in high school, which was I had a lot of fun memories, and I'm sure I had some bumps too, but they seem to recede as you get older.
So what was the band like?
Good. We had a good band. There was a lot of kids in band. Betty Brady was, I think, our band director the whole time, and that was the day and age when if the band marched, you came. You didn't have an excuse if you had a job. You didn't have an excuse if you were, like during Cattleman's days. Fred was a cowboy, for instance, several others, and he got off his horse, put on his band uniform, and marched. There wasn't any question. There wasn't, I can't march. And not too long ago they said, well, we can't have the high school band marching anymore because the kids are too busy. Well, there wasn't any choice. But I really liked it. We went to Canyon City. We went to some different contests, and it was really fun. I played the French horn. I wasn't very good, but enough to stay in band. So
that was a big social.
Yeah, band was important. They had chorus too, and that was important. And the thing about a smaller school, which is true now, you had a chance to do a lot of different things. You weren't narrowed down to just maybe one or two things. You really got a chance to be part of a lot of different things, like the newspaper and the annual and all of those kind of things. And so you could. I did a lot of. Mrs. Rockwell was. She ran that. The plays and things that she was the drama teacher, and she also taught math, and I did plays and things like that, and you could do a lot of things if you wanted to, and so that opportunity was wonderful, and they still can here, I think. Not maybe sports takes over more than it did then, but there was sports then too. Not as many girls.
So, excuse me. Who are your best friends?
Well, I had...
Are they still your best friends?
I keep in touch. It's easy because some of them have come back here. But there was Nancy Pressler, and we stayed friends for a long time. And Audrey Dickinson, and there's a whole number of them that... Because you had maybe some closer friends, but you had a lot of friends because it was a small enough class that you knew each other pretty well.
How many were in your class?
I think we had 50 when we graduated. And I think that might have been about a good round figure for the classes.
Are there special events in Gunnison that you remember particularly?
Probably Cattleman's days. Homecoming then was a big deal when you're in high school, and the parades and things at Cattleman's days. I can't remember. Well, and the fireworks at night, and they were up at the college. I think most of them that I remember somewhere around the college, and then finally in the bowl.
High school traditions that.
Pardon?
The high school traditions talk about a snake dance or a bonfire.
Yeah, we had a bonfire. A football game, and you played Friday afternoons, and Cedar Edge places, and you got to go a lot of times. I mean, parents took people, so you got to go to a lot of the games, and basketball. They had boxing for boys for a while. They had basketball, football. I don't think we had a baseball team. Track, but the girls' sports, I think. We had kind of intramural basketball and bowling, but there weren't the sports or the activities for girls that there are now.
What were the differences in what you did during the summers and the winters?
Well, you dressed warmer for one thing.
You remember any bad winters in Gunnison?
Not as a kid. No, I'm sure there were, but we walked to school, and then when my mother was teaching, then she would. I would get a ride if I was, at the high school, and then we'd pick up friends along the way or something. But no, anybody that lived in town pretty much walked. A few of the boys then in high school had cars and stuff. But in grade school, I walked. I went to school at Pine Street, and so did everybody in that day and age. And then I went to junior high and high school, which in the building that's no longer there, where McDonald's is.
Did you?
And I went to junior high there too. Pardon?
Did you work in the summers, or did you just
Yes,
play?
I worked in the summers. I worked for my folks when they had the restaurant. Then I worked for Sarah Trine and Johnson's Cafe, and I worked then at Lawyer's Drugstore. And one summer I worked at Almont Resort.
You're busy. Well, how do you think the movies influenced your life?
I don't know if they influenced my life, but I really did like them because I went a lot. I mean, I grew up going to the movies, so. I still like the movies, but I don't know in terms of influence. I know they've changed drastically. There's nothing left of the imagination much anymore, language or anything else. But it used to be a lot more, just a lot more chance for you to use your imagination on things. But they were good movies, always, and all kinds, and I've always loved them. But in terms of influenced me, I think I took them pretty much as entertainment.
Okay. Do you have any recollections of how the Depression influenced your family?
Well, and that because it was like I was born in '32, so I think people they just didn't have as much. But I lived at the college, and so but I was little, and I don't remember. I don't remember it changed much. That we had more or less as I got older. So I guess my memory of that. My grandparents, neither one had a lot of money. I don't think they were fine, but they didn't have a lot, and neither did a lot of people. But in terms of impression, I think I was probably too young. I remember more about later on when my dad had collected stamps, not food stamps, but you had to have. There were savings stamps, and then you had sugar coupons, and you had all this. So as managing the cafeteria at the college, he had to have all those. I don't know if they were called coupons for sugar and pardon.
Ration.
Yeah. And he had to collect all that and turn it in lots of bookwork. And also at the college, I remember the years when there were very few boys. I still have the name of some boys and my dad wasn't that much older, so he had a lot of friends and professors and also college students that went to war and came back to visit maybe before they left after their first training. And I still remember several of their names because then I have somewhere a photograph with Ray Holman and Rudy Agansky. I was probably 8, 9, maybe 10, and they were probably 21 or 20, and they were going off to war. They came back to see their friends were left. They had a powder puff derby. I remember the girls and there were very few boys that didn't go to the service. And I remember the war part and saving defense stamps and I remember that more. And I remember I was in junior high. I think 7th or 8th grade, I'm not sure, and they announced that the Japanese had surrendered, I believe it was, and so those kind of things.
So Yeah, so what was the paddle puff derby?
Well, it was a girls' football team. I mean, and I think, and there's a picture in there too about it. I think they wore uniforms, kind of, but they had football. They had girls' football. I don't remember them playing. I just remember them, doing it, and I think they had some kind of uniforms. And because there weren't enough men to do that, and it was done for fun. I mean, it wasn't serious. I don't think. I didn't think it was serious as a kid. Now I don't know. Maybe they thought it was more serious. And they did, some things. There were just not very many boys in school then. But I do remember these. Now I look back, I think they were just kids coming back to, maybe on leave time or something to see friends, and then off they went to war. And I remember you'd get word, or my folks would, of different kids that were killed.
So when did you move from home? Where did you go, and what did you do?
When I moved from home?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went to CSU to school for a year, and then I got married. Fred was a year behind me in school. We started dating in high school, and his brother was killed suddenly the year that Fred was a senior in high school, and he had planned to go to college, and I was going to CSU, and his brother was killed, so Fred made the decision to stay home on the ranch and help his dad, and I don't think his folks put any pressure on him, but that was a decision he made, so I decided I would stay home, and we decided we get married. So
what year was that?
I didn't go very far.
What year was that?
1951.
So after you got married, did you move to the ranch? What happened?
We moved to the ranch, which right now I was trying to think of the name of the people that have it. LaValle's bought it from Fred and his family, but we lived it was a bunkhouse. We lived in the bunkhouse. It's about 8 miles east of town, right on the highway. We lived there, and that's where my first 2 kids were born while we lived there. Then later on, we moved up to and built a house at the Parlin place. And I remember, Tom, my oldest boy, was probably about a year old, and the big house where Fred's folks lived there on the same ranch caught fire. Fred was in Salida selling cattle, and his mom was gone somewhere, and the house caught fire and burned to the ground. And I remember that. And then his mom moved to town, and we lived in the bunkhouse till we sold that and moved to Parlin. And Fred had a cutting horse, very active in politics, so that obviously changed our lives some. He was a rancher. That's how he saw himself. And I was a rancher's wife. And really, it was a wonderful place to raise kids. And there were so many things that needed done. You didn't have to worry about thinking up chores, because there were plenty of them to do. And Fred used to say, well, the kids can, they're better than someone that just can help me. He said, I'd rather have them help me than someone else, because they grew up there doing all the things you do. And it made it easy, because much easier, I think, than trying to come up with things for kids to do in town sometimes, because there was a lot of necessary work, and they knew it was necessary. And so, they grew up to be workers. In fact, their wives say, every time that one of thy sons is busy, they're working, they're doing something, and they all talk about about Fred's work ethic that he handed down to his kids, which wasn't all bad. Sometimes you need to make a little more room, but it was.
So
it was
once you
good.
got married, you lived in the bunkhouse, and then did he?
He went in the service. We'd been married 2 years, and he went into the Army, and he was in Hawaii, or he was in California at Fort Lewis. No, it was at San Luis Obispo, Fort Ord, and then he was sent to what they called USARPAC, but he was actually got to go to Hawaii. He was at Schofield Barracks.
Did you get to go?
And I went. Yes, and he was there for about 3 months, and at that time, a lot of the soldiers, it was at the end of Korea, were coming back, and they would, if you would like to pay your own way and tend to yourself, you would, he could live off post. But he had made sergeant rank. Fred was, was as intense about his Army career as he was everything else. And then I could come back with him on the ship, but going, I had to get myself there. And it was great. It was totally, totally different, obviously, than Gunnison. Jess and Marie Mickelson, he was in a career officer, or not an officer, but a career enlisted man. They were from Gunnison, so they helped us. Hawaii was very different.
They were there also.
and they had been there a while. So, we had someone kind of mentoring us a little bit.
How long were you there?
2 years. Almost, not quite 2 years. And it was when I went, I was on what they called a prop jet. I think it took 9 hours from the coast. And I think now it takes 5 or 7 from Denver or something. So, but yeah, it was a wonderful experience. You're very dependent on each other, and that was good for us. And I have a lot of good memories of that. And we made friends. Fred worked hard. We didn't have kids, so he would work holidays and stuff. And then the wives could go in and eat on a holiday if their husband was on duty. And it was a great experience.
So then when you came back...
And then we came back to the ranch.
Tell about Schweitzer and Field.
And it was when we first... It had been Schweitzer and Field when Fred and I were married, and we went to cow camp in the summer up on the Cochetope. But it was Schweitzer and Field, and that was Fred's dad, who had a partnership with Charlie Schweitzer, who was a businessman from Denver, and they had show cattle, Hereford cattle, that they took around the country and at the big fairs, and it was a full-time job almost just to show cattle, particularly in the winter months. And then they had a sale, sold their cattle, and then Fred's dad and Mitch Muniz, who was also a cattleman, put some cattle together and had one more sale. Then it became, from Schweitzer and Field, it went to Field Land and Cattle Company. And they had Herefords at the time, and also did some show cattle for a while. Then eventually had a dispersion, and Fred and his dad, and they were looking to sell the main place at the time, and maybe possibly find a ranch somewhere where there weren't the long winters and so forth. But Fred's dad died right about then, and so that didn't happen. Fred's sister Shirley Woodbury and her husband were on the ranch part of the time also, and of course Fred's mom, Sue.
So did you travel around showing cattle?
No, just stock show. By then it had tapered off. By the time we came back from the army, it had tapered off, and so we did a little bit, but but mostly in Denver. And then by then Fred after that had a cutting horse, and we did do that. It was pretty fast. More weekend trips. He did show at stock shows several times. It was an extremely good horse. We were extremely lucky because he was he won a lot. And Fred liked that. He roped and all that kind of thing. So yeah, and I love to I like to go. So if the car door opened and I could figure out how to do it, take the kids and get in and go if we could. I also had 2 grandmothers here in Gunnison, so I got to go with Fred more than I might have, and they loved staying with their grandmothers. So worked for everybody. Very lucky to have a grandparent close. My boys were. Not for just babysitting, but just very lucky, because people don't get to do that so much anymore.
So did you live on the home place?
Well, the home place at the beginning was right on the highway, 8 miles east of town. And then we moved, when we sold that, and eventually Fred also he and some friends bought the McDonough place on the Cochetope, but we didn't live up there. They just ran their cattle there in the summer. Then eventually he owned that for a while, and later on then was narrowed the ranch down to a little bit smaller, more manageable, because he wanted it for his, his kids were grown and doing other things. But if they wanted to keep a ranch, he wanted them to be able to do that. So that's why they still have not the whole ranch that Fred had. We moved around a bit with our cattle, but they have the ranch, and it's still pretty good sized out of Parla. And they have a manager on the ranch.
So the kids come back.
Pardon?
Your children come back and are able to enjoy the ranch life.
Oh yeah, Mike particularly comes from Durango. I have 3 boys. Mike is with Wells Fargo in Durango, and so he's probably kind of the go-to guy, and he's the best one to do that. So that's a good thing. And then I have the other boys. They're 3-way partnership, and they have a really good manager on the ranch right now. And Mike goes back and forth quite a bit. And then Tom teaches at the University of Nebraska. And Pat and a partner. He's a managing partner of. I'm trying to think. I can't think of the name of his business now. But they do a lot of mediation and facilitation and stuff like that for government, big private companies. He did one here and they do it on contract. And he he facilitated a great big BLM I guess great big BLM meeting here in Colorado, and had to, as a grown-up that was facilitating this meeting, had some of his, some of the people from the BLM that had known him when he was a kid come to the meeting. And he said, man, I'll tell you what, I was ready to be told. Then he said they'd been with the BLM a lot longer than I had known about it. So, but anyway, they turned, 3 boys, married, to have kids. And, growing up on a ranch, I think was, a big advantage in many ways. Lots of great kids in the world, but it made them realize about a lot of things, because their work was important and different things. And so I think, and growing up in Gunnison.
Where do they all live?
I have Mike and his wife Kathy live in Durango, and Pat and Thea live in Boston, and they have a little girl, Willa. And Tom lives in Nebraska. He's now the head of a department there. And he taught at CSU for a lot of years. Then he worked for the National Cattlemen's. And he has 5 kids. He has 3 older boys. 1 that graduated from DU and is teaching with Teach America. 2 that are graduating this year from Boise State and Greeley. And also that he remarried and has 2 little ones that are almost 3 years old. And so he's got 2 sets of twins. And the oldest boy is one. Like Justin said, if I could have been a twin, I'd always had a friend. And
tell us about how you started the retail business.
Probably because I didn't know what else to do. Partly, I had moved to town, and I thought, well, I had looked around for a job or something, and I said to somebody one day, I said, well, CJ said, I don't hire my friends. and we laughed. So I said I couldn't get a job, so I just had to start a business. But just, Mary Ellen kind of wanted to do something for show, and so, and I had thought about it a time or two. With my mom we'd talk about it someday, maybe we'd open a kid's store, but not very seriously. And so we did that, and then Nancy Treadway bought Mary Ellen's section when Mary Ellen built a house at Powderhorn, Mary Ellen and Hugo. And then I bought Nancy out, and then I stayed a long time, and I really loved every minute of it. I said if I'd been 10 years younger, I would have kept it 10 more years. But it was good. I mean, it was fun. It was great to have, a kid's store. And I had good neighbors, I had wonderful customers, and it was a really good place to be for that length of time. It's not the biggest money maker in the world, for sure. But
you were really involved with the business.
Yeah. If you own your business and own your own business, you better be involved with it. And it gave me a chance to be involved in some other stuff, to give to some causes that were interesting to you, to hire lots and lots of girls over the years, which was a revelation to me because I'd only had 3 boys, and then to have girls working for me and get to know them really well. I mean, I loved that. I mean, I had, girls to work, a lot of girls that worked part-time. I hired high school, college kids, and a couple ladies, closer to my age. But it was good. You couldn't ask for a better place to spend your time. And I liked it. I mean, I liked it. I just got old and tired.
I don't think so.
And besides that, I was never going to get a website done.
Okay. Well, I know that you were instrumental in working with the downtown to revitalize the downtown area. You worked with the Chamber of Commerce, and weren't you on the business board?
I think everybody does that as much as they can, and you can only do so much. I knew a man one time that had a business in Gunnison, and he literally would be out on the street and say, "Come on in," and kind of. He didn't pull you off the street, but sort of. So, and I thought, well, that's weird. Why are you doing that? Well, after I got a business, I realized because it's a small town, and I was really interested in keeping downtown active. Because I think your downtown, regardless of a mall or whatever else, which is fine. I mean, that's the way businesses are going. But you need a vital downtown. I still think that. But and I think that the people that have businesses down there all kind of have the same goal. Everybody's in a different spot, and you have a business in a small town, probably. So you have a little more. You really don't want. I guess you want to be your own boss partly. and but it's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to have a small business.
Well, how's the downtown changed from when you were growing up?
Well, businesses
What
come.
was it? What was downtown like when you were growing up?
When I started the business,
No, when you were growing up.
about the same size as it is now, in a way. Different places. There were stores that had been there quite a while. I mean, there was 2 grocery stores. One was Zugelder's, one was Jorgensen's. There was Fogg's, which turned into the Toggery. There was Miller's clothing store. There was, and they changed some. The W Cafe and Lawyer's drugstore, which was actually Martin's drugstore, and then became Fleetwood's, and then became Lawyer's.
And they had soda fountains.
Yes, and they had a soda fountain. And when I worked when it was Fleetwood's drugstore, and for the life of me, I think by then they'd taken the soda fountain out. I cannot remember the soda fountain. I remember that people came and got their Sunday papers there, and one day Bob Hope came in with some of his friends that had Moncrief, and he looked just like he did in the movies, and he wanted a paper, and he wanted the paper right now. And I said, well, we're saving these papers for our customers, because they had their name on each paper. And Mrs. Fleetwood said, well, I think we'll just give him one anyway. So we gave him a paper. I don't know who lost their paper, but anyway.
So, do you remember the March of Dimes, when all the kids in Gunnison would come to town and they would put dimes on the sidewalk on a tape?
See, no, I don't know. That may have been after me. I mean, I really don't. I know about the March of Dimes, but I don't remember that. But maybe it happened and I just don't remember. But maybe it was, a little after I was in school. I don't know.
Everybody would donate a dime and they'd put it on a tape and it would run the whole length of Main Street.
Okay.
For polio.
Yeah, see, and I don't remember that. But some other things where they raised money, but I don't remember that.
Well, what were some other places that you visited or lived? Have you traveled?
Well, when Shan Martin was the minister at the community church here, he took a group. Once he took a group to the Passion Play in, I think in Germany, and so I went with that group. And went, Ruth McDonough went, Judy went, and a number of people. It was really, really nice. I also got to share a room with Chris Schweitzer, who had been a friend of my mother's, and so was considerably older than I was. She was going to see some family that lived in Sweden, in the Scandinavian country. I think Sweden, but I'm not sure. So that was interesting because I got to visit and hear about how things were when she was growing up and when she was a young woman here in Gunnison, and she'd raised her boys, and so that was kind of made that unique and really very nice. And then I went to Israel with a group that Shan Martin took, and I loved that. It was amazing. I don't know that I'd go now, but it was an amazing place, and he was excellent to go because he took care of everything. You just followed him around, and he had a lot of different experiences there, and he was an excellent travel guide.
Well, what were some of the happiest times of your life?
Well, I don't know. Lots of
happy.
I guess lots of them. I was looking at the questions and thinking about that. I don't know. I pretty much, you have your ups and downs, whatever. But and happy is kind of a different kind of word because you have happy moments and you feel like you're pretty happy most of the time. But it really doesn't cover what life really is. And so, I don't know. I think I feel very grateful. Well, I guess what it amounts to. Just very grateful. I mean, I loved being in Hawaii when Fred and I were there together, and so that was really kind of neat. But a lot of my life was, and I pretty much have gotten to do a lot of things. I've been very lucky, and I have great kids, a lot of good friends, and a lot of it is luck, and you have ups and downs, but I just feel really grateful, and I feel pretty content in many ways.
So, so the things that you are glad you tried, you weren't afraid to step
Well, and
out.
I wasn't a big risk taker. So, I'm glad that I got to do the traveling I did. and I loved, I really loved living on a ranch. I wasn't the best help he ever had. For a long time, I had not ridden a lot, but we were at cow camp, and I was his helper, which was a good experience, I guess. But anyway, I got to do a lot of things like that. I don't know. I mean, I pretty much learned you kind of roll with the punches, and and I just feel very fortunate and really grateful. And to say anything, it was a special time. I loved my kids. I loved seeing my grandkids when they were, the first time you see your grandchildren is just amazing. And my one little granddaughter is from China. And so when I walked in the airport, they couldn't have anybody come visit her. They suggested they not for a month. So her mom and she was a year old, met me in the airport in Boston. And here was this little girl that just came, just a gift. It was just a gift. And so that was each of my grandkids have been that way. But that little girl was a special gift too, just because it never occurred to me I was going to have that sweet little child. And so grandkids, I guess, they really do. And little ones, I love the little ones. I love the little ones in the store. If you're feeling down and out, hold the baby.
That's true. That is the truth. Well, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Probably, there might be, but I don't know. I think I've covered as much as you probably want to hear.
We didn't hear too much about the ranch life. Did you have to cook for a hay crew?
Oh yeah. Well, it was, I think, typical. And it's different now. I remember everybody cooked for their hay crew, and we used to even take meals. Or I'd take meals out to the field if they were, in the vicinity, because they would save them time. Fred was big on keeping the machinery going, and a lot of other people did that too. And you cooked, and we had, when we were first married, they still had they did it with a team part of the time, but then the time we came back from Hawaii and stuff, pretty much it was becoming mechanized, and so you had the hay bales, especially if you sold hay, and then you had a crew coming in. You hired a crew boss, and he'd bring his crew to pick up the bales and load them and that kind of thing. And you didn't cook for them because they took care of their own meals. But then when you got your little more machinery and you had several people that worked for you, not like the big crews like they used to, but then you did. And you fixed meals, and then it wasn't, too many years ago when I was talking to somebody and they said, everybody brings their lunch. But when I was on the ranch, you cooked, and some of them lived there, and so you cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I remember one time I had, and they were always, they're really lots of really neat people. So my kids got to be around adults that we were, were really good and interested in them. And Phil Albright, John Garber, and then we had an older fellow at camp that stayed with us all kinds of really good people, and some college kids that worked for us. So that was good. And I had this, anyway, for breakfast in the morning, I had the older fellow that I knew really well, and there was another man that was working. And I can't remember the one man's name, but he said, now we've got to have soft-boiled eggs or hard-boiled eggs, I guess, because that's the only kind he'll eat. So I would have fried eggs or scrambled eggs, and then I'd have the hard-boiled eggs. And every time he told me that, and sometimes the gentleman would take one of the hard-boiled eggs. Mostly he ate the other eggs, and I just, but I kept getting hard-boiled eggs out there because that's what. So he's got to have those hard-boiled eggs. So you get lots of characters. And it was, it was a work, but it was just part of what you did.
So did you have help cooking? Did you do it
sometimes? Mostly I'd have different girls. I had Terry Haas. She runs the college bookstore. She came when they were kids, junior high and high school. I had my nieces, Donna and Deb Woodbury. I had Kelly Field, and so they'd come. And Ann Mustaine came and helped me some. And I'd have a girl like that mostly in the summertime, maybe for the haying or maybe for 2 or 3 months, and then they'd help a couple days a week, and then they'd come down and they wouldn't be there every day. Margaret Deering. And so I did have some help, and before that, because we didn't always have a crew earlier on, and then I used to go. My mom and would come out. My mom and Carl would come out in the evening and bring dinner and feed the boys, and I would go rake hay. Then in the evening from about 5 o'clock till 8, and that's when we didn't have the bigger crews. We did we did part, and then we had other the crews fed themselves. So yeah, and I liked doing the hayfield, and I liked riding, but I wasn't particularly good.
So what kind of entertainment did you have as ranch folks? I know you had a ladies group.
Well, there was what they called cowbells. Now they're cattle women. You had, Fred was really active in the stock growers, cattlemen's days, a lot of things, and then he, was commissioner for a long time. But we did, typical things. We did, a lot of things you did at home. You did around the ranch schedule. When because there's certain things on a ranch you have to do at certain times. But we got to travel. We always got to travel some. We did, we went to dances at the Elks. We did, movies when we had a theater then. And about this, a lot of the same things. You were home a lot. Kids were going to school. Kids' activities. Once you have kids and they start in their activities, that's what you do until they're all gone, and then you wonder what you're going to do with your time.
So what about branding? Was that
and branding, they branded.
Did they pool the branding?
They didn't.
With other ranchers.
They
or
did.
You do your own?
Fred always had corrals and chutes and stuff, so they didn't rope and brand very often. They may have done some of that at the McDonald place, but yeah, they branded. They did all the normal things that you do on a ranch.
Did they do that in conjunction with
Pardon?
other ranchers? Did they do that?
Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes you just had extra help, or extra ones went to your place. Extra ones came and helped you. And we've almost always had a man that worked for us. And then when he had the McDonald place, Johnny Howard managed that for him. And then we had almost always a hired a man that worked. Sometimes they had families, sometimes not.
Did your ranch belong to the?
Pardon?
Did your ranch belong to the cattle pool, and did you have to move cattle?
No, we didn't ever belong to Taylor Park or anything like that. No, we had just private allotments on the Forest Service or private land. And then when they had the McDonald place, then it pretty much was a group deal, and then Fred ended up owning the whole thing for quite a while. And then but everything was mechanized. He had, and Johnny Howard or your manager up there, and then he'd have one man working for him, and it was a pretty big size operation for a long time. But it gradually cut it down to something that you could have absentee owners like the boys can run. And I'm sure we did a lot of things that just became part of what you did and what everybody else did. Fred was a good rancher, he was a good irrigator, and took good care of his cattle. We went to market, took the cattle to market, things like that.
So how many cattle did you run?
Pardon?
How many cattle did you run?
Just various amounts, depending on how much land he had. So now it's a little bit smaller, but there's still, I don't know exactly what their numbers are. But it's good enough that it takes a hired man and a helper but everything is so mechanized, and so it's done with a lot less help than it was when we were first married. And I remember Shorty George, which would be Glenn's dad, worked for Fred's dad and Fred's family. And that's when they were still feeding the loose hay and so forth. And I remember as a young married woman going out with him, and I thought I was just amazed with everything. And I was very young. So, I was just gung-ho to try it all, which was nice. You're just open to so many things. You haven't had a chance to get stuck in too many ruts yet.
How are you doing on time?
We're good.
We're good. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to preserve in your history? You've had a good life, Mary.
Yes, I have.
A lot of good friends. So what's in your future plans? Are you going to travel?
Well, no, not so. Well, yeah, some. See, my family, my grandkids, my friends, and as you get to a certain age, pretty soon you're pretty content pretty easily. I'm easily entertained. I like the sunshine, I like to laugh, and I like my cat. And so I like hanging out, which took some getting used to. But I like to read. And you pretty much, I don't know. I think once you learn that you kind of have to, you have plans, kind of vague ones, but. You pretty much have got today, and if the sunshine's good, I'm good. If it's gray, I don't like it as much, but I love the sunshine.
If there was something that you had to do over, Can you think of anything that you would do differently?
Oh, sure, several things, but there's no do-overs. There's no do-overs. But you learn a lot. The good experiences, bad. Everybody has their bumps, and you probably learn more from that than you do. Because considering good health and lots of things, what you do think lots of times how easy you've had it. To what some people have to deal with, and it's a matter of luck. It's just you don't do anything any better. It's just a matter of luck.
Well, you and your family have been a part of Gunnison growing. You've watched a lot of
And
changes.
now I know more people at the cemetery than I know in town. But, it's interesting. You go out there, and lots of names. Even names that I knew as a kid that I really maybe didn't know them really well. There's so many names that you recognize, and it's to the town. It's changed, and that's a good thing. But and you're amazing. Even being off Main Street just for a couple of years, I have to ask somebody, well, what's happening down here? Because you don't. You're just in a different spot. But it's good also. I help at the food bank. I love that. Love the people in there. They all have good stories.
Okay, Mary Esther, thank you very much. We're really pleased with the interview, and thank you for agreeing to do it, because those are stories that
Well, thank you. I hope it made sense.
it did. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.